Hi, this is Danny from CG Dreams, and in this quick short tutorial we're going to be looking at how we can do a bake of a sculpt inside Cinema 4D and then use this for Redshift. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. The first thing we need to do is obviously have some kind of sculpt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the good old sphere. I'm going to change the type from a standard to a hexahedron. This is because the polygons are distributed more evenly across the surface and you don't have any poles. Poles are not very good for sculpting on. Now, if we just look at the resolution, it's quite low, but it's fine for what we're going to be using. Just bear in mind that the lower the resolution that you're going to be sculpting on, the more work this displacement has to do. So you may not get as a fine result. So you've got to be careful when going too low on your cage mesh, which is what this is, the base level. I'm going to make this editable, and then we're going to do a little bit of sculpting on it. I'm going to go over to our sculpting layer, and we're going to subdivide this a few times. Let's go for 5 times. That should be enough. And then we could do a little bit of sculpting. So I'm going to grab the pull brush there. That enables symmetry with the X, and we'll just do a quick doodle face on here. Get some eye sockets in there, the brow ridge. Let's give this guy a chin and a muzzle. And for the sake of testing, I'm going to do a few little bobbles on his head so we can see how it compares. And that's just let's just give this guy a little bit of a bit more shape to him. Okay, a quick and dirty sculpt at that. That gives us something to work on. Pretty scary stuff, eh? Don't want to spend too long on this. Okay, that will do. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to go to this command just over here, the bake sculpt objects. And then the first thing we'll be presented with is the file name. So we want to choose the location, and choose a location where your project's going to be so that you can keep everything together. So I've chosen my location. I'm now going to choose a different format because TIFF file seems to have an issue at the moment, as well as PSD. So I'm going to choose PNG in this particular case. We're going to go for 16-bit. As far as the size goes, we don't need nothing too high. 2K for this test will be fine. We want to create a resulting copy so that it doesn't go with the original. This is ideal if you want to compare the original to the one that we're creating. And then we'll go to options. We want to choose to have a displacement. And at the moment the UV maps for this I know are not very good. They're overlapping. So I'm going to choose it to do a quick and dirty UV unfold for us. We're at level 5 at the moment, so we want to go from level 5, and we're going to project onto the base level of our original mesh, which was level 0. The next step is to go to settings. We're going to choose intensity centered and round geometry. We can click on preview to get a preview of what it's going to look like, and if we're happy with that, we can click and go ahead and click on bake. So I've done a bake. I'm going to close this down, and then I'm going to go to my objects tab just to the side here, and then we're going to get our original one. We're just going to move this to the side there. You can see this is just our low polygon mesh, and then we just go for a quick render, and you can see here it's done a pretty fine job of that, considering just how low this polygon level is on this. That's pretty good. So with that done, we're now going to convert this over to Redshift. Now luckily for us, within the Redshift tools, we are able to automatically convert it for us. I'm going to go over to the standard layout. We're going to go to Redshift, and then we're going to go to Materials, then Tools, and then we're going to convert all of our materials. We don't want to replace them in this particular case because I want to show you how it's transferred between Cinema 4D and how it's done to Redshift, so you can see the comparison difference. It helps you in the future to set it up yourself when you're dealing with sculpting inside Cinema 4D anyway. So we're going to convert all materials. We're going to place the material onto our object, and then we're going to make sure that we've got the Redshift tag on there. We're going to right click, go to Redshift tags and click on object. Inside the geometry we need to click on override, enable tessellation and displacement. Now the other thing that we have to do here is we have to make sure that we set up the maximum displacement amount. In order to do this, we need to know exactly what that should be. Before I do this, I'm going to make sure that I've got my Redshift renderer selected, so I have there, that's good, and I'm going to just open up my new material that I've created, and I want to show you how this is set up. So this conversion has created a texture node for us and a displacement node. If you're using a file other than TIFF, you need to make sure that when you're using that file that it's set to the gamma of 1. It's very important. So you go to the displacement here with the texture for the displacement and click on gamma override, and it makes sure that it's set to 1. That's so important, otherwise you won't get the right results. Now clicking on the displacement node, you can see here that we've got this set up for us. It's -1 the minimum, and +1 is for the maximum. When you're using other programs such as ZBrush, it would typically be -0.5 and then 0.5 for the max. This represents the 50% grayscale either way, minus or plus. But we're working inside a Cinema 4D for its sculpt, and this is the way that it wants to do it: -1 and a +1. Notice here that the scale, it says 28. This is going to change according to the sculpt's depth, but when you're using it with files generated outside Cinema 4D like ZBrush, it would typically be a scale of 1. Why is this set to scale of 28? Well, let's look at the original Cinema 4D one and we'll be able to see this. We will go to our displacement, then in here you'll see the height is set to 28 centimeters. So that is why this height is referring to the scale of 28. Because of this, we've got the scale of 28. We need to make sure that the maximum displacement for the object tag is also set at that as well. So we're going to go to the object tag, and in here you see maximum displacement, where we change this to 28 also. And now when we go for a render, we're going to go for Redshift IPR. As you can see here, it's produced the render for us. Now if you've got bad displacements or issues with your displacement mapping, then you're not going to see such nice results. In fact, it's going to be quite a mess. Also, depending on the type of displacement, how much detail is actually captured inside there. You may or may not want to enable this auto bump mapping. I'm going to turn this off. It's not really necessary because there's not really any high frequency detail on there. So let's have a look around this. We'll just move it to a different angle there. You can see here it's done an overall pretty good job. We could possibly have done with maybe a higher map for this. This was a 2K map, but you can see here it's done a pretty good job, and it's got a good 1-to-1 ratio of how much is displacing it. There's a couple of little oddities here and there. You can see here, for instance, it's not quite displacing this little spike here as much. So if you want a little bit more displacement, all you have to do is just ramp up this a little bit higher. So we can say put this up to 30. It's not going to do much in here until we also do this inside the material also. Let's give us a little bit more displacement in there. Overall, it's worked and it's applied it to the object. Again, depending on the quality of the sculpt and the map that you produce is going to be as to the result you're going to get. Now typically when we apply a displacement inside Redshift, what it will typically do within the rendered settings for the displacement, it will have the displacement settings quite low quality, and then it will make up for the rest with the automatic bump mapping. If you turn this off, you need to make up the quality by the amount of subdivisions it's going to apply. So this is done with this minimum edge length. By bringing this down, you're going to increase the quality, but it's going to take longer to render. So if I put this at 2, you'll notice here that suddenly all of those details come back and it looks much more closer to the original. So typically when this is set at 4, this is when it's going to try to convince you that it can do the rest with the automatic bump mapping. The automatic bump mapping can certainly add some nice details, but I wouldn't use it on low resolution meshes with medium to low resolution texture maps. Typically I would normally leave this turned on when I'm doing a proper sculpt, because it's normally high frequency detail which is going to be pushed through. But you can see here with the minimum edge length put down to 2, it's done a pretty nice job of it overall. Now in case you start to see some artifacts or areas on there where it's not looking so good, this could be down to the fact that the UVs may or may not be smoothed, and one way to find this out is simply just to go to the UV smoothing here and then turn it off, and then you'll see whether it all cleans up or not. In this particular case it has cleaned up around the bridge of the brow area here. So that combined with a lower setting of the edge length, we should be pretty bang on with the original sculpt. And there you go. Again, if you want really fast rendering, you can turn this up a little bit, 3 or 4, and enable the automatic bump mapping. But I wouldn't do it on a low resolution texture file for that. I'm just going to go back into our material here. We'll give it a roughness of 50% roughly on our reflection, because it can be a little bit heavy on there.